14 Stories That Inspired Satyajit Ray. Edited and translated by Bhaskar Chattopadhyay. The Goddess by Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay. The long February night refused to let the dawn break. Uma Prasad woke up. He looked for his wife under the quilt, but couldn't find her. His searching hand finally located his 16-year-old wife, curled up in one corner of the bed outside the warmth of the quilt. He slowly shifted towards his sleeping wife and carefully put the quilt back on her, stretching his hand towards her legs to ensure they were fully covered too. Uma Prasad was in his 20s. He had recently mastered Sanskrit and was now turning his attention towards Persian. His mother had passed away, and his father was an erudite man and an extremely pious devotee of goddess Kali. He was at the same time the highly respected zamindar of the village. Many believed that Uma Prasad's father Kalikinkar Ray was a spiritually enlightened man, personally blessed by Kali herself. Every villager, irrespective of age, revered him as much as they revered their gods. Uma Prasad had only recently begun to enjoy the heady romance of newly married life, though he had been married for as many as 5 or 6 years. It was only since a short time ago that he had had the pleasure of his wife's intimate company. Dayamui was her name. Uma Prasad put his hand lightly on his wife's waist, only to find it had turned cold. Very carefully, he kissed her face lightly. Immediately, the pace of her breathing changed. Uma Prasad realized his wife was now awake. He softly called her name. Daya? Daya said in a long-drawn and loving intonation. What? Are you awake? Daya gulped and said, No, I'm sleeping. Uma Prasad fondly drew his wife close to his chest and said, Oh, you're sleeping, are you? I wonder who responded just now. Daya immediately realized her mistake. She said, I was sleeping earlier and then I woke up. Uma Prasad asked in a naughty voice, When did you wake up? When do you think? Right then. When exactly? I don't know. Daya tried in vain to wriggle out of her husband's warm embrace. For some time, Daya's shyness wouldn't let her say when exactly she woke up. But Uma Prasad wouldn't accept anything but a direct answer. After a few moments, she gave up and said, Right then when you... and stopped short. When I... what? When you kissed me? Happy now? Oof. There were still a few hours left for dawn's faint light to start creeping in. The couple began to talk. Much of the conversation didn't make any sense at all, as is often the case with conversations between lovers. It's interesting to note that hundreds of years ago, even our ancestors' ancestors, in the prime of their youth, were as restless and as fickle in romance as we are today. Despite coming from a family with its roots so deeply entrenched in religion and philosophy, the young Uma Prasad had not even once mentioned matters of either to his young wife. The sweet nothings went on for some time. Then Uma Prasad said, I'm going to the west to take up a job. Daya said, Why do you need to get a job? You don't have any problems. I've never heard a zamindar's son working at a job. I do have problems. What problems? If you could have understood my problems, they wouldn't have been problems in the first place. Daya was perplexed. She tried to think but couldn't figure out what problems her husband could be talking about. She said in a naughty tone, Are you troubled because your wife is not up to your expectations? Daya knew very well her remark would upset her husband. As expected, Uma Prasad planted a torrent of kisses on her face to take revenge. I do have a worry, and it's about you too. I don't get to see you during the day. Being with you in the night doesn't suffice for me. I'll take up a job in a foreign land where it'll be just you and me all day and all night long. If you take up a job, how do you expect to be with me during the day? You'll have to leave me at home to go to work. I'll go to work, but return really early. Daya thought this might be possible. but there were so many hurdles on the way. They won't let me go with you. I am not going to take you from here. When you go to visit your parents, I'll come and we'll elope from there. Daya laughed. It was a funny idea. And how long would we live there? Several years? Daya was smiling. But she suddenly remembered something. I don't think I'd be able to stay away from Koka for several years. Uma Prasad put his cheek on his wife's and whispered into her ears. So why don't you make a Koka for yourself? This made Daya blush. But thanks to the darkness in the room, it went unnoticed by her husband. Koka was none other than the only son of Uma Prasad's elder brother, Tara Prasad. For several years, being the youngest in the family, Uma Prasad had been the recipient of everyone's love. After he grew up, for a very long period of time, there was no child in the house. Naturally, Koka was now the apple of everyone's eyes. Koka's mother, Hara Sundari, was proud of her son. Daya said, I wonder why Koka hasn't come to me yet today. Early every morning, Koka came to his loving aunt. This was his daily routine. Though there was no dearth of servants in the household, Daya did most of the daily chores herself. The arrangements of her father-in-law's daily worship and offerings especially were exclusively under her control. But despite her busy schedule during the day, she wouldn't let Koka out of her sight even for a minute. Koka too wouldn't let anyone else other than his aunt dry his hair after his bath or smear coal in his eyes. He refused to finish his milk unless his aunt held the glass to his lips. Dayamui stayed on in his room till late at night to put him to sleep. But early in the morning, Koka would wake up and start crying, demanding to be taken to his adored aunt. Often, Koka got a slap or two from his mother because of such unreasonable demands. But needless to say, his demands became more strident after such punishment. Then, in a daze of frustration and slumber, Hara Sundari would carry Koka to Daya's room and leave him outside her door saying, Daya, here's your Koka. On most days, knowing the routine well, Daya was up in her bed and would come running to open the door and receive the weeping child into her arms. She then gave Koka some sweets, after gleefully devouring which he peacefully fell asleep in his aunt's lap. But today, Koka hadn't come yet, and Daya was worried. I hope the poor child is all right, she said to Uma Prasad. Uma Prasad said, I think it's still quite early. Let me check. Uma Prasad got up and opened the window. Outside, there was a huge orchard full of mango and coconut trees. The moon had not set yet, but soon would. Daya came and stood by her husband and said, It's not too long before dawn now. The cold wintry breeze blew in through the open window. The young man and his beautiful wife stood there for several minutes, staring at each other in the soft moonlight. Daya said, I'm a little upset. Koka hasn't come yet. Uma Prasad said, It's not the time for him to come yet. He's probably sleeping. I know why you're upset. Why? Because I said I would go to the west? That's why. Uma Prasad drew his wife closer. Daya sighed and said softly, I don't know what to think. Why do I feel I won't be able to see you again? Outside, the moonlight was slowly fading away. His wife's words made the color in Uma Prasad's cheeks fade away too. They stood there for quite some time. In time, the moon set, leaving the trees and plants in cold darkness. The couple returned to their bed. After some time, the chirping of birds was heard. Uma Prasad and Daya fell asleep in each other's arms. Gradually, the gentle rays of the sun found their way into the room through the small holes in the windows. The couple was still fast asleep. Suddenly, Uma Prasad's father called him from outside the door. Uma! Daya was first to wake up. She nudged her husband. Kalikinkar called again. Uma! His voice was trembling, so much so that it was difficult to recognize it as his. Uma Prasad knew that his father usually didn't call him at such an hour. And why was his voice trembling? Uma Prasad quickly opened the door. Kalikinkar was dressed in his red robe he wore during his daily worship. Why was he dressed so at such an early hour? On other days, he would not don this attire until he had had his daily bath in the river. As soon as the door opened, Kalikinkar asked his son, Uma, where's my daughter-in-law? There was an unmistakable quaver in his tone. Uma Prasad looked into the room. Daya had left the bed and stood at a distance from the door. Kalikinkar had seen her too. He walked into the room and went straight to his daughter-in-law. He then prostrated himself before her. Uma Prasad was dumbfounded. Dayamui was equally shocked at such a strange behavior from her revered father-in-law. After offering his pranam, Kalikinkar put his palms together and said, "Ma, today I feel truly gratified, but why hadn't you told me so far, Ma?" Uma Prasad exclaimed, "Baba?" Kalikinkar said, "Son, bow your head before her and touch her feet." Uma Prasad said, "Baba, are you insane? What are you saying?" "No, son, I'm not insane. I used to be insanely blind, but today I've seen the light, thanks to her." Uma Prasad had no idea what his father was saying. He asked, "Baba, what are you talking about?" Kalikinkar said, "Uma, I'm truly fortunate. Our family has been blessed by divine grace today. As a child, I had been initiated to worship Kali, and all those years of worship and devotion have paid off today. The Holy Mother Kali, the goddess herself, has descended to my household in the mortal form of my daughter-in-law. Last night, the mother herself sent me a message in my dream. I'm truly blessed, son." In a matter of moments, the flesh and blood Dayamui was branded as the goddess. In the next 3 days, the word spread far and wide. Hundreds of devotees travelled great distances from other villages for a glimpse of the goddess who had been installed in the household of the famed zamindar Kalikinkar Ray. Dayamui was literally worshipped with all the rituals a rich zamindar usually employed to offer homage to his deity. Incense sticks were burned, flowers and fruits offered, and several lambs sacrificed right in front of her. The sudden, shocking attention paid to her all day long made Dayamui weep constantly. She hardly ate or slept. She was in such a state of fear and shock that she had completely forgotten the prevalent decorum of covering her head and face in front of men. All day long, she simply stared at unknown faces with expressionless eyes. She hardly spoke, and when she did, she mumbled. Her bloodshot eyes had swollen from all the crying, and her clothes were in disarray. In the dead of the night, a small lamp burned dimly in a corner of the prayer room. On a thick mattress covered with silk cloth lay Dayamui, her body covered with a blanket. The door wasn't latched, and opening it softly, Uma Prasad crept into the room, his manner suggestive of a thief's. Once inside, he locked the door. Uma Prasad came and sat by his wife's bed. He was meeting her for the first time in 3 days. Dayamui was awake. On seeing her husband, she sat up on the bed. Uma Prasad said, "Daya, what has happened to you?" After 3 long days, those fond words from her husband shattered her trance-like state, and the 16-year-old girl hid her face in her husband's chest. Uma Prasad repeated in an anguished tone, "Daya, what has happened to you?" But Dayamui was silent. After a few moments, Uma Prasad asked his wife, "Daya, do you think this is true? Are you not my Daya? Are you truly the goddess?" Daya finally spoke. "No, I'm nothing but your wife. I'm nothing but Daya. I'm not a goddess. I'm not Kali." Uma Prasad kissed his wife and said, "If that is the truth, then let us escape from here. We'll go and live in some faraway place where no one will be able to find us." Daya said, "Yes, let's go. But how do we go?" "I'll arrange for everything. I'll need some time though." When will we go? Let's run away soon or I won't survive. Even if I don't die, I'll surely go mad." "Don't worry, Daya. Give me 7 days. Today's Saturday. I'll come visit you next Saturday and we'll leave this house forever. You have to be strong over the next 7 days. Please, my love." "All right," Uma Prasad said. "I'll leave now. Someone might see us." He embraced his beloved wife and disappeared into the darkness outside. The next morning, as the rituals of Dayamui's worship were coming to an end, an elderly man, about 80 years of age, walked up to the prayer room. Copious tears fell from his old eyes. Prostrating himself in front of Dayamui's temple, he said, "Ma, I have worshipped you all my life. I am in trouble today. Ma, please have mercy on this devotee." Dayamui blankly stared at the old man. The priest said, "Why, brother, what's troubling you?" The old man said, "My grandson has been suffering from high fever from the last few days. The doctor gave up this morning. If my grandson dies, I'll have no posterity left. I seek Ma's mercy on my grandson's life. I beg of her." Kalikinkar, who was chanting mantras, was visibly moved at the old man's pleas. He turned to Dayamui and said, "Ma, you have to save the old man's grandson." He then turned to the old man and said, "Bring your grandson and leave him at the Holy Mother's feet. Even death can't cross the doorstep of this room." On hearing this, the old man looked as though a weight had fallen off his shoulder. He leaned on his walking stick and hurried home. After some time, the old man returned with his widowed daughter-in-law, who was carrying the sick child. The dying child was laid near Dayamui's feet. Every now and then, the priest would pour some charan amrit between the child's quivering lips from a vessel. The child's mother was a young widow, roughly the same age as Dayamui. The pain and grief on her face aroused a strong sense of sympathy for her in Dayamui. She turned towards the unconscious child, and her eyes welled up with tears. In her mind, with all earnestness, she started praying. "Oh God, I don't know who I am, a goddess, a mortal woman, Kali or Daya, but whoever I may be, please save this poor child." On seeing tears in Dayamui's eyes, everyone present began to say in unison, "Ma has had mercy on the child. She is weeping. Hail the merciful mother. Hail Ma Kali." Kalikinkar continued to chant his mantras with renewed enthusiasm. As the day progressed, the sick child's condition gradually improved. As dusk began to fall, the people there said the child was now out of danger and could be taken home. The news of Dayamui snatching a child back from the jaws of death travelled far and wide, even more swiftly than that of her being the goddess incarnate. The very next morning, another villager approached her to save his daughter, who had been in labour for the last 3 days and was close to death. Kalikinkar said, "That's not a problem at all. Take some charanamrit from Ma's feet and feed it to your pregnant daughter. She'll be fine." Carrying the charanamrit vessel on his head in a gesture of respect, the teary-eyed devotee went home. After a few hours, news came. Apparently, within a few minutes of her being fed the divine medicine, the devotee's daughter safely delivered a beautiful and healthy baby boy. Saturday came. Tonight, Uma Prasad would escape with his wife. He had made all the necessary arrangements. He had collected some money. He wouldn't make the mistake of fleeing to Murshidabad, Rajmahal, Burdwan or any such large neighbouring town, for enquiries would certainly be made in such places. He would rather take the boat and go westwards. Where? He hadn't decided yet. Either Bhagalpur or Mungar. He'd have to look for a job there. He had enough money to take care of the travelling expenses. His wife's ornaments, if sold, would fetch enough money to last them around 2 years. Wouldn't he be able to secure a job in 2 years? Of course he would. Nothing was impossible. Uma Prasad spent the day juggling such thoughts in his mind. That evening he planned to watch the worship of his wife by devotees. He hadn't yet witnessed these evening rituals. When the conches started to blow, he always walked away from the house towards the very edge of the village. This evening was the last worship of the mistaken deity. This evening he would watch it from a distance, with nothing but contempt. Uma Prasad tried to imagine the expression on the priest's face the next morning when he would find out that the goddess had vanished. When the night fell and the household was fast asleep, Uma Prasad left his room as stealthily as a burglar and cautiously moved towards the prayer room. He softly opened the door and entered the room. The lamp was burning in one corner. Uma Prasad went up to Dayamui's bed and found her sleeping. He lightly kissed his wife and tried to wake her up. Dayamui sat up in her bed. Uma Prasad said, "Daya, get ready. We have to go." Looking surprised, Daya asked, "Where? Where? We are leaving in another minute and you're asking me where? We're taking a boat to the western states." Daya sat in silence, thinking. Uma Prasad said, "Come on, hurry up. This is not the time to sit and think. I've made all arrangements.